When you Google the name Christopher Hitchens, or you Google anybody's name, more than likely the first couple of places to go is Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is written by almost anonymously by, maybe in your case, hundreds of people.
Right.
I found your first Wikipedia site, and you were first up, at least according to what I could find on the records, in 2003. Wikipedia is 7 years old. I just wanted you to hear what people said 6 years ago.
Yes.
May 18th, 2003. First item, Christopher Hitchens. You see, we as readers don't know who wrote this, but it's a.
Just before we go on, I would say that when I look at Wikipedia myself on a topic I know something about, I generally find it, so I may be giving a hostage to fortune here, I generally find it amazingly reliable.
Well, it's not a question of reliability. It's a question that they can characterize you here, and I want to read.
Well, they're free to do that.
Back in 2003, what they said, whoever they are. Christopher Hitchens is a British-born American journalist, author, and self-proclaimed political gadfly.
That's not true.
Well,
I'm not self-proclaimed gadfly.
Okay, but here we are.
I've never said the word
this
gadfly.
This is this
about
week
myself.
in Wikipedia. And
in fact, I've disowned the word gadfly. So they're wrong right there.
Okay, but well, that's changed since
Well, how does one get it corrected?
Well, let me read to you what it's today. That's gone. You
Okay,
have to
fine.
go back and say. Today it says Christopher Eric Hitchens.
Yes.
Born April 13th, 1949, is an author, journalist, and literary critic. How we doing?
Well, boring but uncontroversial.
I know. Currently living in Washington, D.C., he has been a columnist at Vanity Fair, The Atlantic, World Affairs, The Nation, Slate, Free Inquiry, and a variety of other media outlets. And it goes on, and this is, it talks about your book, God Is Not Great and all that. But then it gets down, it says, in 2009, Hitchens was listed by Forbes magazine as one of the, quote, 25 most influential liberals in U.S. media. The same article noted, though, that he would, quote, likely be aghast to find himself on this list, unquote, and that he, quote, styles himself as a radical, unquote, not a liberal. How we doing?
It's all right. But it's getting to the point where you're getting publicity for getting publicity, which is, to me, slightly boring. I mean,
well,
there's too much of this stuff now. I mean, it's all sort of reputation about your reputation.
Often Wikipedia has nothing to do with being exciting or boring because they have so many people get their hands in the pie on this thing.
Yeah, but what they're saying is
you.
They might as well say there's a perception that rather than the following is the case.
Well, because
I don't know. I can't see why there's so much of this stuff, but.
Yeah, well,
anyway, I know there is.
It goes on forever and ever, and I just, I was interested in whether.
Well, so will I, for
but
if allowed to do so.
They have the different categories: literary review, Hitchens and the Nation staff, and then they quote one of your old friends, Alexander Cockburn. What's your relationship with him now?
I haven't seen Alexander since his beautiful niece's wedding, where he officiated a little while ago. We used to see a lot of each other, but we live on remotely opposite coasts now. He's in Northern California and I'm in Washington, D.C.
On about the third page of Wikipedia, or fourth page, it says, among his most severe critics is one-time colleague and friend Alexander Cockburn, a weekly contributor to The Nation. On August the 20th, 2005, Cockburn wrote, what a truly disgusting sack of you-know-what. Hitchens, and there's another four-letter word,
yes.
The guy who called Sid Blumenthal one of his best friends and then tried to have him thrown into prison for perjury, a guy who waited until his friend Edward Said was on his deathbed before attacking him in the Atlantic Monthly, a guy who knows perfectly well the role Israel plays in U.S. policy, but who does not scruple to flail Cindy Sheehan as a LaRouche and an anti-Semite because maybe she dared mention the word Israel.
Well, he's nearly right about that. I mean, the sack of, etc., is a matter of anyone's opinion. But on the criticisms of Edward Said, I didn't publish them when he was on his deathbed, except in that I kept on publishing them. He and I had a couple of long-standing disagreements, and those didn't change when he was ill, and they didn't indeed change after he died, when I published a sort of estimate of him. I thought a fairly generous one, but which included the criticisms. It's actually rather silly of Alexander to say that, I think, because if you look at his journalism, he would rightly be proud of saying that he's often written counter-obituaries of people who've been overpraised, and he's chosen precisely the moment when there's a lot of sentimental garbage being published to say, come on, this guy wasn't so great. So it's silly of him to, he gives a hostage to fortune in saying that.
You know,
Cindy Sheehan, I caught out in a lie on Slate. You can check it out. It was exhaustively done with all kinds of threads. She had said she thought her son was killed in a pro-Israeli war, Jewish war for Israel. She later tried to pretend she hadn't said this in an email, and so I caught her twice. I think it's beneath Alexander to be defending someone as cheap and demagogic as her. I mean, who remembers now the Cindy Sheehan campaign, honestly? And what if we'd listened to her? If we listened to her and pulled out our troops as a result of her hysteria, Iraq would now be run by Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda could have claimed to have driven us out in ignominy and shame. Instead of which, Al-Qaeda's been defeated and humiliated, and Iraq is at least on course to become many shoals ahead of it, a decent society. No one can possibly wish that Cindy Sheehan had been listened to then or any other.
By the way, I'll be glad to let you see this. It's 20 pages long, one of the longest that I've seen in Wikipedia. So they're defining you, and when you go out to speak, you'd be surprised how often you might be introduced with the information that's contained in here.
Yes, well, I'll bear it in mind. But now that there's YouTube and now there's all this stuff, it's hopeless to even want to, and in fact, fortunately I don't, want to have any control over one's own image.
Let me